Welcome into College Football Breakdown Week 2 edition, where we bring in one of the best minds in the sports betting industry, focusing in on college football, Joe Lisi. Find him on Twitter at @GoForThe2. Joe, how you doing today, buddy?
Oh, I'm chomping at the bit, Drew. Another great weekend of college football ahead of us. Doesn't get better than this.
Yeah, absolutely wild Week 1 college football weekend. And Joe, what did you learn from Week 1 that you may be able to take into Week 2, Week 3, and beyond that maybe the market might be slow to react? Anything you're taking from Week 1 to try to beat the market Week 2 and Week 3?
Well, a couple of things, Drew. I think the first thing is there's parity in college football. I don't think there's not one team, including Alabama, that can't be beat on any given Saturday for that matter. So when you look at some of the top 25 teams that are laying big numbers in coming weeks, it really favors underdogs each and every Saturday. That being said, I think when you look at progression from Week 1 to Week 2, that's the biggest progression that you'll see from teams in terms of consistency or weaknesses. So we'll have to see how it plays out this coming weekend. But usually teams turn it around from week number 1 to week number 2 in terms of where they were stronger a week from the previous game or contest.
Yeah, I agree with you. The progression they make from Week 1 to Week 2 usually is the biggest of any week-to-week jump of the college football season. We might have one here with game number 363, 364, TCU versus Arkansas. You know, if it wasn't such a huge Week 2 matchup standpoint, this one I think would get more national exposure. But we got TCU traveling to Fayetteville. It opened up Arkansas -1. Now we're looking at actually a flip favorite, TCU minus a field goal, -3 right now, pretty much across the board. The total at 58 at Penny, 59 at Bet Online and Bookmaker. Are you looking to bet this one from a side perspective or more from a total perspective, Joe?
A side perspective. I really like this matchup, Drew. I'm going to be watching this game front and center stage. It's a rematch of last year where Arkansas won in overtime 41-38. Austin Allen led a fourth quarter comeback and really wore down TCU in that matchup. I want to say the market really favors TCU in this ball game, but I love Arkansas for a couple of factors. You look at TCU last year, they were 6-7 overall. Their 6 wins came against opponents with a combined overall record of 23-39. Their 7 losses last year came against FBS opponents with a combined overall record of 60-30. It was one of the worst statistical defenses under Gary Patterson. They allowed 187 rushing yards per game to opposing offenses. And more importantly, this was a team that was 1-5 in Fort Worth last year, and they lost those 5 games by 12.2 points per game. I really think this matchup favors Arkansas because of the physicality on the offensive line. You're talking about a big, heavy offensive line going up against a fast, quicker defensive front in TCU. You look at Arkansas last week, they rushed for 236 yards against Florida A&M. You look at TCU, they had a dynamic effort, 63-0 against Jackson State. But you look at Arkansas's offense overall, they've now rushed for, since 2016, 6 games over 200 yards. Every time they rush for over 200 since 2016, they're 6-0. Those wins have come against 4 FBS opponents, and they've won those ball games by 20 points per game. I think this is a convincing win for Arkansas. I think they wear down a smaller TCU team. I'm not sold on Gary Patterson, and I think this is a double-digit victory for the Razorbacks in this matchup.
Okay, so actually disagreeing with the market move here, Joe. And what about, we know Austin Allen, he's kind of impressed at the quarterback position for Arkansas, but we got, an athletic Kenny Hill playing quarterback for TCU. Do you think he can make plays and maybe make this a little bit more interesting than a double-digit victory for Arkansas at home?
Yeah, well, that's the matchup. I mean, TCU's a quicker team. They're more of a finesse offense and defense overall. So if they score quickly in this ballgame, that's going to put pressure on Austin Allen and that big, heavy offensive line to play score for score. But I think playing at home with the physicality, they have a top running back in Whaley. He's a very underrated running back that takes over for Raleigh Williams. He's a physical guy. If he gets going and starts running downhill behind those big physical offensive linemen. I think this is going to be a long day for TCU's defense. I think they'll be out there for extended periods of time, and Arkansas can control the clock, which will in fact keep Kenny Hill and that offense on the sidelines. And you look at Kenny Hill overall last year, they were an inconsistent offense, especially in third down situations. Kenny Hill, when he's forced into the pocket, doesn't make his reads and progressions. I like Austin Allen. I think he's a polished quarterback, and I think they have the significant advantage playing in Fayetteville this coming Saturday.
Yeah, I can see Austin Allen being more of a game manager in that the beefier, heavier offensive line for Arkansas, just leaning on TCU, second and a half, running away with it. I like that play, Joe. I like it a lot. What about, hey, let's move on to the night slate. We got a couple great matchups. We'll hit on a couple of them right here. 379-380 Georgia traveling to play against Notre Dame. Notre Dame opens -6.5. The market liking Georgia, even though Eason, I believe, is going to be out. So the lines move down to -4. So you can catch Georgia at +4 right now. Total 53.5. Bet up to as high as 58 right now at Bovada. Joe, how are you looking to bet this one?
Well, a couple of factors. I really like Georgia in this matchup. Jake Fromm gets the start. He's a true freshman, completed 10 of 15 passes last week, 143 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions against Appalachian State. This was a Georgia offense that rushed for 221 yards on the ground. Sony Michel had 87 yards and a touchdown. They utilized him in the Wildcat. Nick Chubb led Georgia with 96 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Offensive line played very well against a solid defensive front seven in Appalachian State. They were an athletic defensive front and really played the SEC teams over the last few years very, very tough. They almost won last year in Tennessee and Knoxville. They only allowed Appalachian State in 2016 right around 130 rushing yards per game. So for Georgia to pound the rock for 221 on the ground last week was a solid effort. And you look at their defense last week against Taylor Lamb and Jalen Moore. I mean, they held that offense in check. 143 passing yards for Appalachian State, 132 on the ground. Dominic Sanders and that secondary, for me, are going to be the difference. I think when you look at Jake Fromm on the road in South Bend, you're going to have an up-tempo offense led by Brandon Woodenbush in Notre Dame trying to force Georgia out of its game plan and up-tempo attack. But I think the physicality of Georgia on the offense and defensive lines will wear down Notre Dame, and I think they have a significant speed advantage in this matchup. I look for Georgia to run away with this 31-17.
Nice, Joe. So taking the underdog to win outright. I like it. Hey, one more here. The nightcap, 387-388 Stanford at USC. The Notre Dame game will be broadcast on NBC. This one a little bit later on Fox. I hope Gus Johnson's calling this. Don't know that for sure, but it looks like we got USC opening -4. Now commanding a -6 price tag. That's at Bookmaker. 5 Dimes has this as high as 7, so make sure to shop around on this one. Check out SBR Odds Screen for the best number. Looks like Stanford's going to come into this with a little bit extra rest, some more preparation time, if you will. Last year, Stanford won 27-10, but however, that was before Sam Darnold got the nod at the quarterback position for USC. So, Joe, are you looking to bet this one from a side or a total perspective?
Both. I love USC in this matchup, and I like the over. A couple of factors. Stanford is 5-2 over the last 7 years over USC, and have won those games by 8.8 points per game. USC last won in 2014 and 2013. Both of those games were a 3-point margin. But a couple of factors about both Stanford and USC. We'll start with Stanford. They coming off a dominating victory in Australia against Rice. They rushed for 289 yards on the ground. In 2016, Drew, this was an offense that rushed over 207 times, and they were 7-0 in those ball games and won those games by 17.7 points per game. But I wasn't sold on the Stanford team as a whole last year. I mean, they were 10-3, but in the first 7 games of the year, they were 4-3 against solid competition. Those 4 wins came against opponents with a combined overall record of 57-34. In the last half of the season, they were 6-0. Those 6 victories came against opponents with a combined overall record of 27-46. So they beat up on sub 500 teams to make it to 10-3 overall. When you look at the speed factor for USC in this ball game, I think they have a significant advantage going up against a slower secondary in Stanford. Stanford allowed 224 passing yards per game. Rice did not challenge that secondary vertically. I expect Sam Darnold in that offense to attack Stanford vertically on seam routes and post patterns. I think that could be the difference as well. You look at USC overall, they rushed for 232 yards on the ground against Western Michigan. And now, since 2016, every time USC rushed for over 200, they're 6-1. They won those games last year by 24 points per game. You look at defensively, USC is going to have to shut down the run, but it's a different rushing attack than they gave up last week to Western Michigan. USC allowed 263 rushing yards to Western Michigan. It was a wide open attack. Western Michigan runs 5 wide, more of a read option with Bogan and Franklin. Stanford's more of a traditional pro-style offense. They're going to run between the tackles. I think that's the matchup you want to see play out, and that's why I like USC and Cam Smith in this ballgame. He didn't play last week in that victory over Western Michigan. Last year, every time USC held opponents under 100 yards, they were 6-0 in those matchups and won those games by 20.5 points per game. I think this is a significant speed advantage for USC, and I'll bring up the bye week. A lot of people are saying that the bye week will benefit Stanford in terms of a game plan and, more importantly, extra preparation time. Possibly from a game plan perspective, but I have a differing opinion about bye weeks. When they come in the early part of the season, like especially after week number 1, I think it disrupts timing of the offense in terms of continuity on the offensive line and, more importantly, continuity from a quarterback to wide receiver relationship. In the early part of the season, that's when you want to see consistency by playing each and every week. I think a bye week benefits teams later in the year when they can get healthy and they're injured on the offense and defensive lines. So I don't look at this bye week for Stanford as being a benefit in this ball game, coupled with the fact that you're talking about a Stanford offense that only had 2 games last year that passed for over 200 yards. Came against Washington State, and it came against Oregon. I'm not sold on Keller Christ. I think Sam Darnold has a significant advantage playing at home. I think they strike fast, put the pressure on Stanford's offense, and I think USC wins this convincingly. I think they get into the 40s. 45-28, USC wins this ballgame.
Boom. Joe liking the over. Joe breaking down bye weeks mattering more at the end of the season than the beginning of the season. Guys, that's how you win, and that's why we like bringing on the great mind of Joe Lisi. So, Joe, I really can't respond to that. That was a great breakdown, man. Find him on Twitter, @GoForThe2. Joe, anything else before we close this out?
No, I can't wait for a great weekend of college football. I mean, if you thought week number 1 was great, wait until week number 2 because we have great matchups from 12 o'clock all the way to the West Coast games at 10:30 at night. It's going to be a great weekend of college football.
All right, Joe, and look forward to talking to you next week. This is a CF Breakdown with Joe Lisi. Check him out on Twitter, @GoForThe2. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.